Well, welcome everybody to the Green Dialogue. Um, Amanda had picked up on a conversation with Tom Smith, I think about um, what do we ask a lawn care provider as a potential fact sheet that they might offer. As you know, Tri-County does a lot with watershed education, but that's just one topic of conversation today. If other people have other things they want to talk about, we can stray. But do you want to give us a little more about your thinking, Amanda?
I'm impressed with the list you guys came up with. Questions to consider. Yeah, my thought is we have a number of fact sheets that we produce for municipalities to use throughout the Tri-County region. So I think this would be a nice complement to that. And certainly any community, can have their logo on that piece and have it be from them if that's important to them. But I just loved the idea of having these questions available for homeowners, just in case they don't think about every aspect of what a green practice for their lawn could be. I did come up with a few more after reading you guys' list. Again, thank you. Great job. I'm so happy to see you talked about whether or not they use soil test, but I also thought we should ask, will you use my soil test? Because the lawn care company, they're, I guess this indirectly the soil is their business, but I don't know that they care to be making or taking, soil samples and doing that test, but maybe they would offer, or maybe they would utilize the homeowner's test if they're not willing to do it themselves. And I see you talked about, what kind of fertilizers or pesticides are used. I want to take that a step further and see if they use any organic products or phosphorus-free fertilizers. Because even though we have that law in Michigan, I don't think it's still prohibited for gardens, trees, shrubs, and new turf. So it's possible you could still be using some fertilizers with phosphorus, and that concept of the slow release nitrogen. The lake healthy, I think that's super important, but I think we could take that a step further too and see if the company will obey fertilizer free zones that not only included lakes, but also streams or storm drains, basically any proximity to that water source or the storm drain, which is going to go right into the water. Loved your idea of references for the neighborhood. I thought asking if they had testimonials also might work. And green treatments, I don't know much about mosquito and flea and tick control, but I know there's some products out there that are organic. But I also wondered about things like aphids and grubs and what kind of treatments they might offer for those options as well. Are you guys thinking, we typically like to recommend mowing at 3 inches. Do you think that's unheard of? And 4 inches is as low as we're gonna, or as high as we're gonna? I was curious if there was a discussion about that. How many inches to leave your lawn?
I know Tom was recommending 4 inches, but a lot of lawns mowers don't even go that high.
I know.
But part of it is just that's more of a natural way to keep the grass healthy, to choke out the weeds, but certainly there's a wide range of styles. I just think a lot of people don't necessarily know about the mow high and let it lie approach.
Right.
So this could be partly educational. I'm not sure where people are coming at this conversation. That list that was sent out was just a brainstorm list. I've continued to brainstorm a little bit, but I don't know if you want to share that, your screen, with people that you're looking at.
Sure.
But let's just pause for a sec. Do people are people up to speed on this conversation, or does anyone need any further background about what we're talking about? I want to say I really appreciate Tri-County's interest in being at these conversations.
I would also like to add just like the idea of lawn companies offering the option of, instead of blowing your leaves and
Oh, yes.
picking them up, but like we also offer just mowing them, so that, because I keep seeing a whole lot of people out there, as I did as well, and it's got to be green grass, not one leaf on there. And lawn companies can just go and mow it and then not be picking, not blowing the leaves, but just mowing it, so they're at least not blowing around and whatever. But I would wonder if they offer that option of saying, this is another option to deal with leaves, kind of thing. Because we can break, educationally, it would be nice to be able to break people free from this idea that in the fall there should be no leaves on the grass there, and it should be green grass instead of like mow them and let them just lie. Yeah, you're actually taking care of them. They're not picked up, but they're at least mowed over and not blowing, kind of thing. They're mulched and they're just still on the grass. So
Related to that, Emma mentioned that a lot of people are blowing leaves into sort of wetland buffer or the natural areas, and that is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, in some cases it might be okay, but that can
yeah,
also choke out native plants. So I think it's also illegal, but
Leroy, I just had that happen. Our company blew all of our leaves into our pond. So here we are trying to get rid of all this stuff in the pond so that it doesn't keep growing. And now I find out that all the leaves actually went into the pond. So yeah, that does not help anything.
I think the wording that she had used was, let's see, don't blow them into natural areas.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there might be a area in your backyard where you might start a leaf pile, or you potentially could talk about composting. And I like to have a big pile of leaves next to my compost bin so that I can add the carbon in with the nitrogen, add it to the food scraps. Who's Emma?
Hello.
Hello.
Sarah was just talking about their lawn company blew the leaves into their pond. And we were talking about your comment about blowing into natural areas. And
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge problem this time of year. And so if you're not able to, do your own landscaping, I guess this is why we're having this discussion, is those things that, you can educate your neighbors on and ask your landscaping company,
So in looking at the ordinance, Leroy, I just heard you say you thought it was illegal to, kind of dump the leaves somewhere that's a natural area. That would sound
I'm not that familiar with it, but maybe we
Okay.
can check on that later, or maybe Emma knows.
good idea.
Yeah, there is, I know at least with land preserves, I don't know I can look up right now with parks. I think it applies to both parks and preserves that, yeah, there's no dumping of natural litter or vegetation, really dumping of any kind, but there is specific language that talks about vegetation.
Yeah, in our, it's a big problem in our rural areas that people just take it to the farm field.
Yes, we have a preserve that the front is a old farm field we're restoring, and whenever we do a litter cleanup, we're always taking big bags of leaves out, and because that's really how a lot of the invasive species spread. And then we just end up putting a lot of money into removing them from those areas. So I think it comes down to a lack of education, awareness. We do send out letters to neighborhoods that are adjacent to parks and preserves when we're seeing an issue there.
Oh.
One of my intern made a brochure even about, the effects of dumping and all those things. So I think what's difficult is that even in the places we've sent letters out to, we're not really seeing an improvement. And I think a lot of this just comes down to a huge shift in perspective, about these things and why they're actually harmful. And there's so many convenient ways too to like properly take care of those things. So maybe it's more of a focus on how to take care of those things properly.
So I have a question then, Emma. So if you live next to woods, you say not preserved, not public property, whatever. If you live next to woods, you would also say, don't put the leaves in the woods, like don't rake them up and put them over.
Absolutely. We actually were just working with at the Briarwood natural area. It's a very small natural area in the community. And one of the things we did notice is that even from that common area, there's leaves being blown in, and we know there's spring ephemerals that grow there. And so those leaf piles can hugely affect those plants coming back the next year. Because I think too, there's this perspective that leaves are great, and they are. They can provide a lot of nutrients. And so like we tell people like, don't get rid of them completely. And then people kind of like think, oh, well, I'll just dump them in the woods. But when they're in that volume, it can be very harmful, especially to a pond, because that's just going to fill the pond in and create a lot of organic matter, which is good too. But if we're continually putting the neighborhood's leaves into that pond, it's not natural at that point.
I didn't know that about wooded areas that aren't wetlands. I'm just thinking kind of in terms of like my parents who live next to woods, and they just have always put them in the woods.
Yeah.
But didn't know that. I mean, I got it for the pond, but I didn't know that for the wood part.
Right.
Too. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, again, there's a perception that leaves are really healthy, but for those areas. But I think what's really important for homeowners to start to kind of realize is that really everything should be managed within your property. You wouldn't go and dump a ton of leaves on your neighbor's property. So, treating the natural areas that border those properties is, treating them just like that is important.
So maybe something about, creating a storage area for leaves or a compost pile would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you do that on your property? Some people might not have space, obviously, but creating an attractive leaf storage unit.
Yeah, and they make great mulch for your garden bed. A lot of people totally clean out their garden bed in the fall, and it's really good to put leaves in there. I mean, I just take them whole and put them in there, and then anything that's left over, I just mulch with my mower. So that's the other thing is, some people are able to manage that on their own because they're mowing their own lawn. And so I just mulch them right into the grass, and it's really good for the grass and your soil. But then some people are dealing with a contractor in a landscaping company. So they have a little less control over that too.
If you haven't seen some of the fact sheets on Tri-County's website, I'll post the link, unless you want to do that, Amanda, in the chat. Oh, there you go. They do great work with graphics, and they try and keep the fact sheets fairly simple and to the point. But just great resources on their website.
Yeah, Tri-County does a really great job, and I love all their graphics. Information is great.
Good, good. That's what we're here for.
It's great when there's an easy way for neighborhoods to help educate each other. And
Yeah, I would love to see the piece that you said you sent to residents.
yeah, we can share that with you. We send like a formal letterhead, and then we also came up with that little brochure too last year.
Yep, I just shared a few sort of general questions. I don't know if that's something that needs to be on there or not, but I mean, there's some common sense things you might ask if you're hiring somebody.
Right. No, I think that's important. We want to give them the full package of questions to have in their minds when hiring. And I like this title I saw somewhere of Hire Smart.
Paige had shared a really good resource from MSU Extension. She couldn't be here today because she had a meeting, but it's basically the Smart Gardening series.
Mm.
I'll post that in the chat window. But any other thoughts that people have? Again, this is different than a normal dialogue where we're sort of focusing on one topic, but I really like the fact that you suggested it, Amanda, and we can continue to sort of evolve these other ideas too this way if we think it's a useful process. I like the idea of group thinking.
Me too.
Did you envision this as more just geared towards someone who's hiring a lawn care contractor, or more general to someone who's doing it themselves?
Yeah, I think specifically for hiring a lawn care contractor. I don't know. I may be biased because I live near a golf course, and like I hear many of the people here today, just a lot of the practices bother me personally, and I have a desire to spread that education. And it's not a piece that I've seen, so I think it could have some real good use.
Do golf courses mulch in the higher grass area? Do they mulch the leaves, or do they blow them off and then mow the grass? Can you tell?
I don't think they do any mulching.
And
But
they get all the leaves gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They mulch their grass clippings.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
not the
it
leaves,
sort
I
of
don't
depends on how many leaves in one spot. But it's a good question. I think Tom does a lot with turf grass management, and of course lawns or golf courses are a major part of that profession. We've had a few guests. I know Tom Smith would be willing to take a look at a draft if you want to share it with him. And
Okay.
then Robert, what's Robert's last name? Also goes by Bob, but he works with a lot of landscaping companies, and I'm sure he'd be willing to take a look at it as well.
Awesome.
What else is on people's minds? Or any other comments related to this topic?
I did have a question. Was it Anne who lives on the golf course? Not all my screens are coming up here.
Oh, that's Amanda.
Amanda.
Oh,
that lives on the golf course.
Amanda, sorry,
Yeah.
Amanda.
No worries.
So do they blow the leaves into, like, are there wetlands on the property at all? Do they?
You know, I can't say that I've walked to the back of that, but unfortunately, yeah, it's right on the river.
Okay. Are they like mulching into the river?
I do not know. I
Okay.
detest golf for all of these reasons, so
Yeah.
so,
I get it. No, but whenever I'm driving by golf courses, especially in the township, I have noticed there is more of a disregard for the wetland ordinance. And that can be an angle that people can use, at least if you live in Meridian Township. There's no dumping of anything or within that wetland buffer. So sometimes
Good
too,
point.
it's about finding that like angle that you can kind of use for leverage to support, that change.
that's a good idea. I should do some sleuthing.
My screen froze up and I missed that, but anyway. Any other thoughts on this? Now you've got some fall specific fact sheets that you distribute through social media and other spots, right, Amanda?
Hmm.
Are there any that you would care to share with us today that some of these folks are on our Green Neighbor Network, and we like to use our network to sort of distribute this information broadly to neighborhood groups. So I would just encourage you, if you've got anything that you want us to share, be happy to do that. So that's an ongoing invitation.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve, thanks for joining us. Are you specifically have interests that you'd like to chat about today?
Not particularly. I just wanted to join this group for the first time and see what kind of things you talk about. So if I have a question, I'll let you know.
Fantastic. It's pretty wide ranging and it's open to whatever people would like to chat about. So, and sometimes we'll have a guest speaker. It's rare that we have Emma here. So,
What
and
is her expertise?
Emma, do you want to share your expertise real quick?
What's my expertise? Like, what do I do at the township?
Yeah, really, I don't know who you are.
Yeah, I am Emma Campbell. I'm the land stewardship coordinator for Meridian Township. And so what that really means is, we have about 1,700 acres of parks and preserve land. And so I coordinate the stewardship and land management on all those acres. And I also run the Meridian Conservation Corps, which is the volunteer group that helps me do that and meet all those stewardship goals. So yeah, I'm also happy to help homeowners with invasive species, native landscaping, like native plants, and just like a general resource.
Great.
Leroy, I can share that with the election and the bond over with, the Meridian or the Okemos School District is ready to get our environmental committee started again. I asked for it to be started and we started it right before COVID, December, January. And then COVID hit and we had to stop and not do anything because it was just too much. And so last night I was talking to the superintendent and he said, let's get going. And so we've got a really good crew and we're going to just start to systematically, it's part of the strategic plan to have the environmental lens be part of how decisions are made. And things are going to be looked at systematically so that it's not based on volunteers, it's based on systems that we create so that environmental things will be happening in a lot of in the district as a whole. So I was just so excited for that to be able to get started. And some of that will be part of what the food compost group has been talking about and seeing where we can make that fit in too. So I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, the Okemos and Hazlet schools certainly manage a lot of property in the township. It would be interesting to talk about some of the natural landscaping options, you know, balancing the use of turf with more diverse or more sustainable landscaping practices. Especially if they save money and time and work.
Oh,
Yeah, I think something that, well, I've really been trying to, I think it's important when our municipalities also take all of these actions, or, you know, it's really just about the little steps for making your yard more sustainable, for treating your local natural areas and, you know, forests well. But I think it's really helpful when our municipalities are on board. You know, like the best way to teach people is to just show them. And so, you know, that's something that I think is an interesting way to show our residents how to do that. And so one of my goals is, like, you know, not making that change necessarily on all of our properties, like our grounds crew and everything, but like take the farmers market, for example, which we've tried to put a lot of native plants into. And maybe we don't have to cut all the vegetation down for the winter in that area. So like I noticed that the solar panels, they cut all that down. And it would be really cool if we could just have some areas where we're demonstrating that we can use leaf litter, or we don't have to cut all the plant matter back for the winter, because that's good insect habitat and wildlife habitat. So that, as a township staff person, that's something that I would really like to see happen. And it's just a great way to teach residents in the community how that works and that it is doable, you know.
That's a good point. I did get a, I think our environmental commission got a letter from a resident recently in the Briarwood area. It's talking about doing the same thing. There's been a lot of native plants around their pond. But one change in the way native plantings around Briarwood drains are managed could be hugely beneficial to bird and insect populations. We've noted that the plants are cut down and mowed in late fall. They were left up until the ambient air temperature reached 50 degrees in the spring. It would provide superb nesting for many solitary bees and other insects. The seed left in place could also provide food for birds. So other people are also mentioning that.
That's great.
One issue is that if you create a nice healthy turf and leave it at 4 inches, it's going to grow more. You've got more exposed leaf surface that can absorb the sunlight. If you cut it down, you might not have to mow as frequently. Your grass might not be as healthy and there might be more weeds. But there's sort of a balance, it seems like, of mowing frequency, depending on which resources you have or how much you want to mow your lawn. It may be more desirable to mow it shorter than 4 inches or shorter than 3 inches. So I'm not sure what the best answer is on that, but it seems to me that we often mow more frequently than we need to. The township, at least.
Yeah, I think it was a huge issue last summer too, in what I observed, because it was so hot. And when you cut the grass down as short as it is cut, sometimes it really only exacerbates, you know, the fact that it's so hot and dry, and it really just kills the grass. Yeah, but there are some areas like at Central Park South where there's a couple areas fenced off right now that are receiving signage, so people know more about what's going on. But there is an effort there to reduce like the mowing and just do plantings. But those changes went through because when they were mowing, they were like sinking into mud because it was a low wet area. And so they weren't able to mow it all year. So it's kind of finding that right angle of like, so that it makes sense, because that was actually an idea that the Parks Grounds crew brought to us. And over at Marshall Park too, off of Marsh Road, we want to like make a wet meadow there because there's just such a large area that's always wet. So that's not going to be the case for everyone. Not, if you live in the township, it's pretty likely that you'll have a low spot somewhere or a wetland or a vernal pool. So again, those are good jumping points to kind of push that change through a little, and then just kind of helps shift that perspective when it does work out.
Anything else on people's minds? Again, got any issues in your yard? Questions for Emma or Amanda, or we have some other experts as well here. Bruce is quite knowledgeable about some of these topics.
I have a, oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to,
Go ahead.
I wanted to mention about riverine systems. Amanda mentioned that they were blowing leaves from a golf course into a river. But from a macroinvertebrate standpoint, that flush of nutrients into the system is pretty important. Moving water, you don't have that buildup of nutrients. So a lot of these little critters that live at the river bottom, that's an important food source for them. So personally, I don't see an issue with blowing some leaves into the river. It's essentially a good thing from a aquatic insect standpoint.
I'm kind of curious about issues related to, I end up mulching leaves into the lawn, but actually I have more pine needles than leaves. And so I'm wondering if there's any difference between pine needles and mulching them. I mean, I can't mulch them all because there's just too many. I have to kind of put them in my yard bags and have Granger take a lot of them away. But I'm kind of assuming that mulching some pine needles is probably just like mulching leaves. Does anybody kind of have any insight into that?
I do have a lot of pine trees in my yard too. I think mulching some of them I've seen that it can be beneficial or it's not harmful, but pine needles can, in large numbers, I believe, make like a soil a little more acidic. Pine trees can be like allelopathic that way, where they can potentially degrade the soil quality, or, in really large numbers. That's why when you walk into a nice big pine forest, it's really like there's not as much growing in the understory. But I think in smaller amounts, it's probably fine. I compost a lot of mine. I had a question for Bruce really quick.
Okay,
So I thought that was really interesting what you said. And so so if it's a moving water system, like a river or a stream, that's not, having that mass of leaves is not as much of an issue outside of like, if it was piled on the bank and there's like wildflowers that grow there, that could potentially be an issue. But as far as it going into the water, it's really like the stagnant, non-moving water bodies we should be thinking about.
yeah, there've been quite a few studies about nutrient inputs. And they usually kind of flatline during the growing season and other parts of the year. But then when falls and the leaf fall occurs, there's a big spike of nutrients, and then it just gradually tapers off again. The macroinvertebrates, the ones that scrape on algae that's growing in the system, the algae is looking for that input of nutrients, and that of course cascades down the food chain as well. So all those little riverine critters that eat either algae or eat the ones that eat algae, they depend on that input of leaves.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Does it matter whether they're native trees or ornamental or, stuff in people's yards that aren't necessarily native plants?
I don't think it matters. Organic matter is organic matter.
I can imagine that there'd be some differences of opinion in terms of what you can throw in the river and what you can't. But that is interesting and a little counterintuitive about that practice of allowing or putting extra leaves in the river.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it comes down to how people are offloading like such a large amount of leaves too. Because when I see it, it makes sense in a river system where it's like moving. But mostly where I see it, it's like like some of the piles go up to my hip, and they're, like I've seen like almost a quarter acre in size at the end of some of these neighborhoods. And so that's obviously a lot. And it just seems like there's better places for that to happen. And so I think maybe it's more about, reaching people's perspective on, again, that positive way to use leaves. So what can you do with leaves? And there are so many uses, and they are so good. They're a really good nutrient source. I personally, I think it's great when people put all their landscaping bags out, and they are responsibly getting rid of the leaves in a way. But also I've stopped at people's place. I'm like, can I take your leaves for my compost? Because I wish people could utilize the nutrients more. But yeah.
There's so many of us that don't know what we're doing too, though, because it was last year where I said, okay, I'm not going to rake my leaves. I'm going to just leave them on the grass. And I didn't really care for how that went. But I put some of them in I have little tiny, just those square by, 2 little garden things. And so I put a bunch of leaves in there, and it was a total mess because they didn't they didn't break down at all. And then as I moved them back out in the spring, because they didn't break down, it's complete sludge at the bottom. So I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I clearly didn't do well. So that's why, you know, this year I'm mowing them, and then maybe I'll mow and put some of them and see if they break down. But, you know, it's definitely that whole trial and error of, I don't know what I'm doing, to, okay, well, that didn't go well, so I'll try this year. But so I'm thinking about how you're wanting to take people's leaves, and I'm like, golly, I had my own that I didn't bag and get taken out, but I sure didn't know what I was doing in terms of putting them in the garden, because they did absolutely no breaking down at all. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is, you know, just crazy. But live and learn and keep trying, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is a huge trial and error process. Just gardening in period, right? And so I noticed too, like when I did that, my leaves didn't break down all the way for sure. Like there were still leaves. But then what I do is I'll just put some like natural mulch over it or whatever. And then I just let it all, I kind of like layer stuff. And then it helps with weeds. And then I just cover those leaves right up. But I also have, that's like in the part of my garden where my perennials are established. So I'm not necessarily trying to pop new stuff in there or let things come up. I'm doing it like around everything. And then I just layer that mulch on, and then it like will continue to break down throughout the year. But I also take the leaves I have 2 big compost piles, because I have the ability to have a big compost pile in my yard. And so that's a lot of time what I use the leaves for.
Does anybody know what Granger does with the leaves they collect in the lawn waste stuff?
I believe they have a contract with Hammond Farms to manage their yard waste.
Yes, they do. When we did the tour over there, yes, Granger takes them over to Hammond Farms.
So does that turn into, do they use that as a mulch then eventually?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
It goes
That's
into
wonderful.
it goes into the big pile, the compost piles.
Some of it gets used on the landfill. You know, I'm not sure how much of it, but in terms of, there's a lot of soil and landscaping that happens at landfills. But other parts of it get sold. I'm not sure exactly where that would be a good question for Hammond Farms. We have, they're going to be helping take a large pile of mulch from our recycling center. If any of you have a need, now's a good time to grab some out at on Lake Drive, 5976 East Lake Drive.
So maybe
I'm sorry, Emma, I have a question actually for you.
Oh,
Of course, you mentioned about composting leaves in the fall, and that's a great idea. I have probably like a 2 meter cubed, 2 meter compost bin I use, but when you put all the leaves in there isn't any nitrogen source to put in there right now. And if you leave it in there, the next fall or next spring, they're just going to be all compacted together. They really wouldn't have deteriorate or mulched any. So what would you recommend in that case?
I don't know totally. I'm not a composting expert by any means. I've just, what has worked in my yard before, because I just turn I kind of like turn my entire pile. I do put a lot of like, I use straw too, and I use like old grocery bags. And so I try to kind of turn it like once in late fall and then again in the spring to kind of get the leaves mixed in with all the other compost that I have in there. And so far I've had luck with the bottom like 2 feet or 1 foot, like turning into soil over time. But again, it's over time. It's not necessarily that I'm planning to use the leaves next year. But I have had my compost for like about 5 years now. So I'm starting to be able to take soil from it.
Do you
But
ever
I'm not
have,
like super focused on, okay, I need to have this as soil next year. I'm just happy when I do have soil to use from it.
so what's your idea about adding fertilizer to the compost to increase the nitrogen? Is that something that's a no-go, or that's all right?
You know, I don't know. Again, I'm not a total expert in this area by any means. If somebody else knows the answer there. Of course, you know, with fertilizer use, just being very responsible and only using essentially what you need to, so there's no runoff. But I don't know, maybe somebody else has an idea for that.
It look sprinkling layers of dirt between layers of leaves, and I've gotten rid of over the last decade just huge amounts of leaves. I will also add some of those leaves to the compost pile that mix well with the food scraps, which are also high nitrogen. But fertilizer sounds like it would work. I mean, pretty much everything will eventually compost. It's like, how quickly do you want it to happen?
Yeah.
But layers of dirt will
You're
also
supposed to
add
mix-
microbes. Go ahead.
Yeah, aren't you supposed to mix green in with the brown for a healthy compost? I seem to recall reading that or seeing that somewhere. Rather than just brown leaves thrown in there.
Yeah, maybe that's why my pile works out too, because we put a lot of grain, other like stuff from our yard too, when I'm weeding, and food scraps and all that.
If you don't have adequate food scraps to mix with the leaves, you could use some grass clippings. Instead of leaving all the grass clippings down, pick up some to mix with the leaves, and that'll break down quicker.
And coffee grounds are a good source of nitrogen too, that you'd be getting from those grass clippings. So if you're a coffee drinker, that might help your pile.
You can also pee on your compost pile, which I don't recommend, but in an emergency, it's an option that will add nitrogen.
This is being recorded, right?
You got to do it late at night in the dark.
You can also throw dead bodies on the pile. You know, there's all kinds of things you can do that are borderline legal. I did share a fact sheet, fall landscaping tips. It has a little bit on composting in it. To be more serious than normal.
So I wonder too, like just from this whole conversation, because it does get kind of confusing, and it does seem like it can kind of contradict itself with how to use leaves, but I guess maybe what could be helpful on a sheet to go out to neighborhoods or whatever is, what's the outcome you want to see? You know, do you want to improve insect habitat in your yard? So maybe you just, like, I have only one maple tree that's pretty small right now, so it doesn't drop so many leaves that it kills my grass. Or like maybe I'll mulch it right when it first falls, and then whatever falls residual, I just leave those leaves for, you know, overwintering insects. But then if you just want to be able to get rid of your leaves responsibly, then you can bag them up and put them on the curb for Granger to turn into mulch. So maybe it's just really about like, what is the outcome you want to see in your yard? You know, because not everybody maybe just wants to deal with the leaves. So at least they can get rid of them responsibly.
I know I would love it if Ranger came by with a vacuum thing to suck it up instead of having to bag stuff. I miss that. Our leaves in our yard, we have a giant oak tree. No, I'm sorry, it's maple, and then a giant birch tree, and the maple leaves drop all at once, completely cover our front yard. We finally get that cleaned up, and then probably like a week later or two, 3 months later, then those other leaves, that other tree drops completely. And so twice our lawn is just completely covered. And it's, chokes the lawnmower if you wanted to mulch it. Takes the entire day to clean up, and it all drops at once. So it's not clean it up a little bit at a time and mulch it or move it over to a corner. It has to be taken care of all at once. And it's a little overwhelming. So mostly we just bag it and get rid of it because it's just too much to deal with, essentially. I wish that was the case, but that's the lawn we have. So
those maple trees can really drop a lot of leaves. Have you, like, when you do your initial first cleanup and bag them, do you ever mulch the second round?
Well, the birch tree, and I don't know 100% that it's birch tree. It's kind of an odd tree because when all of the other deciduous trees on the block are empty, ours is still there, which means we have every bird in the neighborhood in our tree. And sometimes their leaves stay there until after the final leaf pickup. And then we have to try to figure out what to do with them because Granger isn't picking up leaves anymore. 1 year they didn't drop at all, which I don't understand. And it's just weird. Like right now it's half of the leaves are there and half of them are gone. But usually it's the year it was like well into, snow. There was snow on the ground by the time the leaves fell on that second tree. So it really just depends on when. It's not consistent. Like there isn't a plan. It's wait and see what happens and then what does our schedule allow for.
Yeah, are those leaves like a light yellow, kind of papery?
They are now.
That might be a beech tree.
Yeah, okay.
They really hold on to their leaves for sometimes all winter until they bud out.
When we moved in, the branches hung down really low, kind of, and touched the ground. And it was just like the leaves were kind of like this purpley kind of color, and it looked kind of sad and creepy looking. We've cut the branches up so you can walk underneath the tree now, and it looks a little more normal, except for now it definitely holds on. It definitely it's probably a beech tree. That's probably what I was thinking of. But it's an interesting tree. Sorry.
Yeah, it can be hard to plan when all your leaves, or you have different trees and they're coming out at different times, and like oak trees drop really late too, or sometimes they don't drop hardly at all. And yeah, that's tough.
It is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're trying really hard. So it is a lot of work though. I am lucky I don't have a ton of deciduous trees in my yard.
We do have nice shade.
Yeah. And they're beautiful, right? But yeah.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous for like, I don't know, 2 weeks, and then they're bare.
Yeah. That's how fall feels, right?
Unfortunately.
Does anyone else have a similar experience with trees in their yard? Because again, I have a lot of pine trees, so I don't always have to deal with that.
I have similar in terms of I have a willow. It's a willow, but it's the is it crooked willow or corkscrew willow? And it is a late dropper too. I mean, there are often times I couldn't even get it because we had snow and then the snow never left. And when it drops, they're really, their leaves are, corkscrew, and they're really thick. So when it drops and it's on the grass, it is like back when I did rake them, it was just like it was a lot of leaves that was really, really thick. But then if you know, when it dropped so late and I couldn't do anything with it by summertime, and then my husband would mow, it wasn't a big deal. It was fine. But yeah, I have that same thing where it's a really late dropper.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what does like the following season look like for you? Does it seem like it affects your grass negatively the next year?
Not that one. When I let the maple last year go, it killed my grass.
Maples will do that. Yep.
Yeah, but the willow was fine. It, you know, year after I'll just say multiple years, I haven't been able to get out there after it finally dropped before, you know, the snow is here, and it's fine. The grass, I mean, that part of the grass isn't really that thick anyway. Well, I mean, it's not bad, but no, it was the maple that killed the grass. The willow doesn't usually, even though it's thick, it's a thick in a different way where it's like it's almost still allows the air movement in there. But yeah, no, it's fine. I'm gonna mow it today though, again, to just, you know, kind of move it and stuff, but it's much better than maple.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure what species of maple or if all of them, but I have read that certain maple leaves, like I thought Norway maple was one of them, can have like an allelopathic tendency. And what that is really too is maple saplings they grow really well in shade. And so when a maple drops all of its leaves, it's trying to put those nutrients into the ground, but it's also trying to kind of get rid of everything else that might compete with the little babies.
Oh, okay.
Too. Like if you were thinking more in a forest setting, you know, there's like a lot of maples. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, my neighborhood, that's the tree that they used for planting along the roads is the Norway maples, and majority of them, there's just a big dead patch around the bottom of them. Of course, they're so shallow rooted too, but they certainly put out a lot of whirligigs, and I'm constantly fighting new maples popping up everywhere.
Yeah. They get pretty aggressive pretty quickly.
Any other comments or questions for the group?
Well, I guess before we leave, I just want to say for those in the township, I don't know if everyone's in the township, but definitely reach out to me if you have questions or want to bounce any ideas off or anything like that. I'm a resource to you. So.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
Real quick, if I could, just a couple seconds. I got an email yesterday that maybe some of you might be interested in helping me out. It's from a guy up in the Oscoda area. I don't know if he's from here or what, but his name is Sam Lovell, and he says he's working on a short book about Mud Lake. Don't ask me why. I don't have any other information. We don't have a lot of but if any of you have any anecdotal stories, I know about that area, if you email me, I'll forward whatever you send to me over to him. I'm not going to edit anything. I'm not putting a lot of time into this, but you know, he's looking for stories, sources, history, I guess, about Mud Lake area. And Leroy, just so you know, I'm writing you a quick email. I'm forwarding his email to you, and just a quick paragraph, and maybe you can share it with the environmental committee. If I don't get anything, I don't get anything. This is not a huge deal, but just throwing that out there.
Yeah, there's some big fish in Mud Lake apparently, and that's the area.
Film a fishing channel or something there at one time.
Maybe.
Where is Mud Lake?
It's the area behind Hazlitt High School,
Okay, that's what I
and it's
thought.
a beautiful natural area. There's a drain nearby as well. It's not very accessible. I'm not sure if it's legal to fish in there, but there's definitely a lot of wildlife back there.
Well, if it's on Hazlitt School property, you'd have to get permission from them technically to go back there, but assuming they said, yeah, we don't care, knock yourself out.
I've heard it's a
I
good
just-
natural area though.
Oh, good. You fixed your video. Thank you. You've been sideways the whole time.
Oh, I have?
Yes, you have.
Oh gosh, I can't even see what I'm doing. So sorry about that, everyone.
Anyway, just a quick thing. I'm good now. Thank you.
I'm sharing my screen real quick. This is my pile of leaves with green material added on top. And some sprinkles of other compost. And it just, again,
Oh,
it melts down. This is a deer that was born a couple of years ago, and right next to that pile of leaves behind, I've got another compost pile right next to the leaf pile. So it makes it easy to feed leaves into the food scraps.
that's very cool.
You can sort of see this makeshift pallet bin. Anyway, I think that's all I got here, just to give you a sense of what I do with my leaves. But it's a mix of things: mowing, mulching, throw it in the compost pile, blow it in my neighbor's yard. No, I don't do that. Just kidding. He actually gives me, that's right next to my neighbor, so he'll put his leaves in that big pile too. So anyway, it's been a rich conversation. I think we're over time. Sorry, that's my bad. But thanks, Amanda, for inspiring this conversation. Hope you'll come back again.
It was super helpful. Thank you so much for the very thorough discussion and ideas.
Any other parting comments?
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.